Tesla's making a splash with this whole robotaxi thing.
Right.
Like, they even held the event at Warner Bros. Studios. Feels kind of Hollywood, doesn't it?
Definitely a bit of that Musk showmanship.
Total sci-fi vibe. But here's the kicker. The stock market. Not so impressed. Shares tanked like 8% after.
Yeah, that's it's not exactly a standing ovation from investors.
So what gives? You are amazing listeners. You guys sent in a ton of articles on this. CNBC, Barclays Analysis. We've even got reports from analysts at Jefferies, Piper Sandler, Morgan Stanley.
The who's who of Wall Street chimed in on this.
Exactly. And you want to know, is Tesla about to change the game for transportation, or is this more of Elon Musk getting a little ahead of himself, which, let's be real, happens sometimes. So we got to dive into that.
Buckle up, right?
For those who missed the Musk show, he painted a pretty wild picture. He's talking a $30,000 self-driving car. They're calling it the Cybercab.
Kitschy.
Great. On the streets by 2027, no steering wheel, no pedals, fully autonomous. And just to sweeten the deal, he throws in this Robo van concept too.
As one does.
This thing's meant for mass transit. High density transport is what he called it. And the real kicker, he says, will have this unsupervised full self-driving, which is Tesla's, driver assistance system, in our Teslas by next year.
Bold claim. Important to remember, though, unsupervised in this context doesn't quite mean drivers can just take a nap in the back. More like the system's supposed to be able to handle more of the driving on its own, but you still got to be ready to grab the wheel if things go sideways.
Right. So not exactly those self-driving taxis from Minority Report just yet.
Not quite.
But still, pretty impressive, right? So why are all these analysts we mentioned feeling, underwhelmed?
Well, take that Jefferies headline, for example. It was brutal. We underwhelmed.
Ouch.
Basically, they're saying, along with some of the other analysts, that Tesla didn't really show us anything new with their full self-driving tech at this event.
So it's one thing to promise the moon, but investors want to see the rocket.
Yeah, exactly. They need proof, not just hype.
And Barclays didn't hold back either, calling Tesla's plans long-term AI dreaming. No immediate opportunities there. And Piper Sandler. They're already predicting the stock's going to take another hit as the hype dies down.
It's like a reality check after the big party.
Right. And Morgan Stanley pointed out something really interesting. They said, it seems like Musk wants Tesla to be seen as an AI company now, not just a car company. But their argument is this event didn't really back that up. So is this all just smoke and mirrors? What about this Cybercab thing? I mean, $30,000 for a self-driving car by 2027. Even for Tesla, that sounds incredibly ambitious.
It does. And remember, that price tag, that doesn't include all the tech that goes into making these vehicles truly autonomous. You're talking next-level sensors, powerful computers in the car itself, not to mention the mountains of data they need to train the AI. One Forrester analyst even said, doesn't seem plausible this decade, referring to that 2027 goal.
Yikes. And we haven't even gotten to the elephant in the room yet. Regulations.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other beast.
Even if Tesla somehow manages to make this tech work perfectly, getting past all the legal and regulatory hurdles around autonomous vehicles...
It's a minefield.
It's massive. You're talking about convincing governments and, frankly, the public that these things are safe to be sharing the roads with us.
And that's not an easy sell, right?
Not at all. Self-driving tech still feels pretty new to most people, and there have been those high-profile accidents, which doesn't help. You know what's interesting, though? Uber and Lyft, their stocks actually went up after Tesla's announcement. Why would that be?
Now think about it. They're not exactly best buddies with Tesla, are they? What this says to them is that Tesla might not be steeping on their turf with a fleet of robo-taxis anytime soon. Gives them some breathing room to work on their own self-driving projects.
Wow. So it's like this whole thing sent shockwaves through the entire industry. But okay, back to Tesla. Even with all these challenges, you got to admit, they have a knack for pushing the limits.
Oh, for sure. Love them or hate them, they don't play it safe.
And you can't forget, Musk also talked about this Robo-van idea, this self-driving van that's supposed to carry a ton of people. He's selling it as, the future of public transport.
Right, and that's where things get interesting. If we loop this back to Musk's whole Tesla's an AI company thing, it's clear he's thinking way beyond just you and me owning a car. He's picturing a future where it's all autonomous vehicles, cars and vans, changing how we get around cities, making it cheaper, more efficient.
He actually said cheaper than the bus.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty bold statement.
Right. Imagine hopping into a robo-taxi for less than a bus ticket. That could be huge, especially in cities that have terrible or expensive public transportation. But And I know you're thinking it.
There
There's got to be a downside to all of this, right?
there always is. And this is where we have to think about the ripple effects, the societal impact. Because as cool as it sounds to have super cheap robotaxis everywhere, what happens to all the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, even truck drivers?
Yeah.
If this tech takes off, that's a lot of jobs.
That's a huge issue that often gets lost in all the excitement over the shiny new tech. Job displacement is a real concern, and it's something that needs to be taken seriously by both, policymakers and these companies. We can't just pretend it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And it's not just about jobs either. There are questions about fairness and access. Like, if robotaxis become way cheaper than public transit, does that create a system where only the people who can afford it get convenient on-demand transportation, and then everyone else is stuck with whatever's left of the public system?
Man, that's a good point. This isn't just about, cool cars anymore. It's about how our cities are designed, how we live in them.
It's about the future, basically, and whether it's a future that works for everyone or just a select few.
We started with Tesla wanting to blow our minds with robotaxis, and now we're talking about, reshaping society.
That's how deep this rabbit hole goes.
This is why we love doing these deep dives with you. You always bring the insights. So for you, dear listener, what are the big takeaways from all of this?
I think number one is this: Tesla's robotaxi dream. It's a long game. It's cool, don't get me wrong, but don't expect to be hailing a cybercab on your phone tomorrow. We're talking years, maybe even a decade or more before we see this tech everywhere, if it even happens at all.
Right, this is a long way off.
Exactly. And even then, who's to say Tesla's the one who figures it out? They've got serious competition in the self-driving game. Waymo, Cruise, even the traditional car companies are pouring money into this tech.
So it's not just about if this tech works, but who manages to actually bring it to market first in a way that's safe, reliable, and that can actually scale up.
Exactly. Which brings us right back to those bigger questions we were talking about. As this tech gets better, it's on us to have these conversations about what it means, the impact on jobs, the need for everyone to benefit from it, and the ethics of, artificial intelligence making decisions in these vehicles.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's like we're on the verge of something huge, but we need to make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that means keeping the conversation going, planning for what's next, being willing to adapt as this tech changes.
This has been an amazing deep dive, I gotta say. Tesla's big promises, the potential problems, we covered a lot.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This conversation is far from over.
Totally. So, to our listeners, we'll leave you with this. Keep those questions coming. Stay informed and be part of shaping the future of transportation. Because what's ahead is full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to navigate it the right way. Until next time, keep those minds curious. They're not exactly known for being Tesla's biggest fans, right?
Right. It's like this announcement was a gift to Uber and Lyft.
A gift!
Well, yeah. Think about it. Tesla's not going to be flooding the market with robo-taxis anytime soon, which is good news for them. They can breathe a little easier, focus on their own self-driving stuff.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like this whole thing sent ripples through the entire industry. But okay, back to Tesla for a minute. Even with all the roadblocks, you got to give them credit. They always seem to push the limits of what's possible. And remember Musk talking about that Robo van thing? The self-driving van? Supposed to carry a ton of people? He's pitching it as, the future of public transportation, right?
Right. And that's where things get really interesting, right? Because it ties into that whole thing about Tesla being an AI company. It's like, Musk's not just thinking about you or me owning a car anymore. He's thinking bigger. Fleets of these things, cars, vans, all changing how we move around cities. Cheaper, more efficient. That's the idea.
He literally said cheaper than the bus, which, wow.
That's a bold statement for sure.
Imagine, though, hopping into a robo-taxi for less than a bus fare, especially in cities that have, terrible public transportation or crazy expensive fares. That's a game changer.
Yeah.
But, and I'm sure you were going to say this, there's got to be a downside, right?
There always is.
Yeah.
And it's something we have to talk about, the societal impact of all of this. Because as cool as it sounds to have super cheap robo-taxis everywhere, what happens to the drivers? Bus drivers, taxi drivers, even truck drivers. If this tech actually takes off, that's a lot of people out of work.
That's a huge issue. And it feels like it gets lost sometimes in all the hype over shiny new tech. But job displacement is a real concern, and it's something that needs to be taken seriously, both by, the government, these companies, everyone, really. We can't just pretend it's not going to be a thing.
I agree. And it's not just jobs either. You start thinking about fairness, right? Access. What if robotaxis get so cheap that only people who can afford them get convenient, on-demand transportation, while everyone else is left with whatever's left of the public system.
It's like, are we creating a two-tiered system?
Exactly. That's the question, and it's not an easy one to answer.
Man, that's a good point. It's like, this isn't just about, like, cool cars anymore. It's bigger than that. It's about how our cities work, how we live in them.
It's about the future.
Right.
And whether that future benefits everyone or just a select few.
We started with Tesla, this big robo-taxi reveal, and now we're talking about, like, reshaping society.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
That's why we love doing these deep dives with you. You always bring the big picture thinking. So for our listeners out there, what are the key takeaways from all of this? What should they be thinking about?
I think number one has got to be Tesla's robo-taxi thing. It's a long way off. It's exciting, sure, but don't expect to be ordering a cybercab on your phone next week. We're talking years, maybe a decade or more, before this is even a reality, if it ever happens at all, right?
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Right? We started with Tesla, robo-taxis, all this cool stuff, and now we're talking about, like, the future of our cities. Wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
But that's what's so crazy about these new technologies, you know? It's not just about the tech itself. It's how it changes everything else around us. How we live, work, get around, everything.
And that's why we do these deep dives with you, to really dig into it all. So for you, our listeners, what are the big takeaways here? What should they be thinking about after listening to all of this?
Biggest takeaway. Don't hold your breath waiting for a robotaxi. Yeah, Tesla's vision is cool, but it's a long, long way off.
Definitely not going to be hailing a cybercab on your phone next week.
Exactly. And even then, who knows if Tesla's even the one who figures it all out? There are other companies, Waymo, Cruise, even the big car companies, they're all over this tech too. It's a race.
So it's not just about if it works, but who gets it right first, right?
Yeah.
And in a way that's safe and that can actually, like, work in the real world, not just in a lab.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the big picture stuff we've been talking about. As this technology gets better, we have to be ready for what that means, how it affects jobs, how to make sure it's fair for everyone, even the ethics of AI making decisions while we're just along for the ride.
That's a whole other deep dive right there.
Right. Tons to unpack on that one.
It's like we're standing on the edge of something huge, but we need to make sure we're headed in the right direction, you know?
Yeah.
Not just blindly racing towards it.
I couldn't agree more. And that takes, like, constant conversation, planning for what's next, being willing to change course as the tech changes. It's a process.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive, I gotta say. From Tesla's big promises to the potential problems, we've covered a lot.
We really have. And honestly, we've just scratched the surface.
That's the truth. So, to our listeners, we'll leave you with this. Keep asking those questions, stay informed, and be part of shaping the future of transportation, because there are so many possibilities ahead, and it's up to all of us to make sure we get it right. Until next time, keep those minds curious, everybody.